Hey folks, and welcome back to the podcast. Before we jump into today's episode, please hit that subscribe, follow, or rate the podcast if you're listening on Spotify. We really appreciate it. It's a key performance indicator for us and helps us reach even more people.
What might seem a joke at the time never comes across as funny when you're having to explain it to your employer during a disciplinary hearing, etc. Yeah. Any meeting you go to, like a formal meeting with your employer, you always want to make sure it's minuted. Now, often the employer will want to minute it for themselves, and then they should provide you a copy with the notes afterwards as well, but there's nothing stopping you from taking your own minutes. I wouldn't ever advise an employer to allow a lawyer to attend, because then I think it might become quite an adversarial type meeting. It's often not that an attractive argument for an employer to say, oh, but we didn't agree to the recording, if actually the recording contained highly relevant information. What we call the burden of proof in criminal cases and like civil employment cases is very different. So in the criminal case, you've got to prove that they've committed the offence beyond all reasonable doubt, which basically means like you've not got to have any reasonable doubt in your mind that they did it. In employment, it's not like that. You just got to have a reasonable belief. At the end of the day, when you're going through a disciplinary process, your focus should always be on keeping your job. So you want to always have that in mind. Don't behave in such a way at a disciplinary that actually you just make the job of your employer dismissing you easier because you've said so much stuff, disparaging stuff about management or whatever, that kind of just confirms the decision that you've got to go.
The Firefighters Podcast is a global podcast seeking to develop, inspire, and motivate the world of the emergency services operators. We seek to encourage and support this incredible group of people. It's brought to you by myself, operational firefighter Pete Wakefield, and I speak with individuals from all walks of life who I sincerely believe can add value to or develop those who have chosen this life path. Please support your emergency services wherever you are in the world, and thank you for listening. Seb, welcome to the Firefighters Podcast. How you doing, brother?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm wicked, mate. Yeah, I'm really excited to have our discussion today because I've seen so much stuff I don't understand, so much tomfoolery, and also in this world where I feel like kind of everyone's lost a little bit of social structure. We've lost a little bit of a grip on reality, or maybe we've come up with this is kind of always the case. We've come up with our own perceptions of what reality is, but then when that bleeds into genuine law, when you exist in an organisation, as many of listeners will, predominantly in the emergency services, if they work in the ambulance, the police, the fire service, some of these they're all very, very old. They're just make them bad. Some of them can be quite militant. Some of them have got policies and procedures that have been in case for years and years and years, and much of them never needed to be used. But now, in the world of social media, in the world of WhatsApp, in the world of everybody having a different opinion of what my rights are and what my rights aren't, there's like a minefield. So we've got several things I know we want to talk about today, but just as a little bit of a capture, just give people familiarity of who you are, where you're from, and such as.
That's fine. So my name's Seb Walker. I'm an employment lawyer. I've been practicing for 12 years now. I've worked at various law firms across the East Midlands. I actually work in-house now for a large company. So I deal with all of their employment issues there.
Can you imagine if somebody said that, sat up, like I know you say it all the time, but if I was sat opposite a disciplinary thing and they said, "Hi everybody, I'd just like to introduce Seb," and he went, "I'm an employment lawyer," I'd be like, "Oh shit."
I wouldn't introduce
no, I know you
myself
wouldn't.
as
It would
that.
be an assumption of
Exactly.
Who's the dude in the room.
Yeah.
He's just here from. Would you declare you're here from HR? Would you say, or are you there supporting when you've been involved in these things in the past?
Yeah,
Are you sometimes on the? I suppose you either. I'm going to get the terminology wrong all the time in this conversation. The claimant or the prosecutor.
The respondent. Yeah,
respondent.
Yeah. Well, I just act for the employer now.
Oh, yeah.
We'll come on to this as we go through the topics, but lawyers generally don't have the right to accompany someone to a disciplinary hearing.
Really?
So you often wouldn't get a lawyer at a disciplinary hearing, an internal one.
But I have heard people say in the past, "Can I bring a lawyer?"
Yes,
and you're like,
you can make the request. If you don't ask, you don't get.
And I know we're jumping ahead of ourselves here, but would an employer have the right to go, No, this is just a hearing.
Yes.
No one's getting sacked here. It's just
I'm
worried about what you're going to say. Am I okay to record it? What the frick?
Well, yeah, I mean, whether it's a meeting that could result in a dismissal it is irrelevant, really. I mean, generally in a disciplinary and a grievance process, actually, you actually only have the right to be accompanied by either a trade union representative or a fellow colleague.
Okay.
So similar to if someone requests to bring, I don't know, a family member along or something, the employer doesn't have to allow it. I wouldn't ever advise an employer to allow a lawyer to attend, because then I think it might become quite an adversarial sort of type meeting.
Yeah.
If they want to bring
surely people feel that way anyway. Like,
yes.
I'm inviting you to a disciplinary hearing, is how I've heard it termed in the past, or sometimes performance and capability hearing, which is sort of a newer terminology for people.
Yeah.
That immediately gets people's backs up a little bit. Yeah. And there's always a worry about, like, what if you say something in this first hearing? Because it's part of the official process now, isn't it? We're into the process. What if you say something that I think is totally outlandish, or I think in itself is something really offensive? Like, you're sat there and I'm sat there and you go, I think you were a right dick the other day, so that's why we're starting. Obviously, likely nobody in the emergency services might say that, but in private sector, if this is just X company, whoever, let's use McDonald's or anybody, I mean, whoever just sits down and they are of a different socioeconomic level and they go, I'm taking Jeff to disciplinary because I'm sick of his behaviour. Yeah. It becomes a formal process then. And if it does get to the point where somebody is up for dismissal, then when you come in at the end, you will no doubt look through everything since the beginning. You'll expect somebody to have taken notes. Yeah. So
I was just about
people
to
get their
mention
back
the
up
notes.
straight away. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just about to mention the notes. So yeah, any meeting you go to, like a formal meeting with your employer, you always want to make sure it's minuted. Now, often the employer will want to minute it for themselves, and then they should provide you a copy with the notes afterwards as well, but there's nothing stopping you from taking your own minutes. And indeed, if you do take a companion with you, either a trade union rep or another colleague, or anyone else that your employer allows you to bring along, encourage them to take minutes as well. And then you've got almost two sets. You've got your own set and you've got the set of the employer. Now, no minutes are ever going to be verbatim, so they're never going to record everything.
This is what I think I heard. That's what you think you heard.
Well, exactly. And sometimes you just got to agree, well, okay, there's two sets of minutes at this meeting then.
Okay.
I mean, sometimes employers will record a meeting. Often they don't want to because, again...
Do you have to be willing to be recorded?
Yes, so both parties should be in agreement. And generally, if both parties are in agreement, it's generally the employer that makes the recording and then shares it after with the employee.
Is this only when somebody's been called to a disciplinary though? What if I raise a grievance against you because I think you've treated me poorly? Does the ball start? Am I in not the power position, but like, do I say what the requests are then and not? Like, if you say, "Oh, we're going to,"
it's the same really. So if you raise,
if the employer said we're going to bring our Seb, you can go, no, you're not bringing Seb. You're not bringing a lawyer.
I don't think
anybody that knows what they're doing shouldn't do that.
I don't think I've never been asked by an employer to go to a hearing with them.
Hearing.
No, it should
mainly
be
because you're quite expensive, I imagine.
Well,
so it wouldn't be the best use of your time.
I mean, you normally expect someone from HR to be there, as well as the disciplinary or grievance hearing manager. But your rights in a grievance process are the same as a disciplinary, really, in the sense that you've got the same right to be accompanied by a colleague or a trade union rep. You should generally be given 48 hours notice of the meeting.
Is that all?
Well, that's a minimum. Okay. So generally people give more than that. So you might give
how many times can you refuse? And I know there'll be so many things which are subjective and case by case basis.
Yeah, so you can.
I can't keep saying no if you want to discipline me.
I mean, if you want your trade union rep to attend, but they're not available on the date, you can legally make a request to have the meeting put back by up to 5 working days.
It's still not long though, is it?
It's not long. Hopefully your rep might be available in that time. If not, another rep might be able to step in. Or actually, there's nothing stopping your employer from adjourning it a bit later. They're just not compelled.
What if you just outright refuse to attend?
Well, if you refuse to attend...
So, no, this is BS. I don't think it's worth me time.
If you raised a grievance, but you refuse to attend your own grievance meeting, I think your employer would just treat your grievance as withdrawn.
Throw it out, yeah.
With the disciplinary, I mean... Clearly, no one can physically force you to attend. No. But what they would do is they would probably give you 2 opportunities to do so. And if you,
but also in this world, an opportunity might be a thing like Zoom.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, Zoom, Teams, anything like that.
I mean, for the longest time, we've had things in court where for the victims' protection, they are not present in the court. Traumatic, blah blah blah. They're zooming from another part of the building or another part of the world.
Yeah. I mean, that's in like criminal cases.
Okay.
But yeah, in employment cases, there's nothing stopping an employer from using technology to have a meeting. There's nothing even stopping them from having a meeting by phone, although it's often best to be able to see the person. But if you just refuse to attend, I think after giving you, say, a couple of opportunities to attend, you would just have to say, well, okay, fine, we'll hold the disciplinary in your absence, which obviously isn't going to be for your benefit because you're not going to be there to defend yourself.
And I imagine during that time you wouldn't be permitted to attend work in most cases, depending on the severity of the disciplinary.
Yeah, but I mean, if it's like a gross misconduct allegation, you'd probably be suspended. If it was misconduct, so conduct that's less serious, you might still be at work. So it would be very odd to not attend a meeting. I wouldn't advise anyone not to attend a disciplinary. If, for whatever reason, they are physically unable to attend, then at least write up some written representations, so written submissions, like type up in a Word document what your response to the allegations are, and then at least they can read and consider that document instead of you actually being there at the meeting. I've also known situations where the trade union rep goes along to the
they often know a little bit more about it, so it's kind of best that at least they're there, even if you're not.
They're there, exactly. But there's nothing stopping you from making requests for reasonable adjustments in a disciplinary or grievance process to allow you to attend a meeting. So say, for example, you're off at the moment with work-related stress, but you're still going through a
very common thing.
Yeah,
literally, mental health and stress now has got to be, and I'm not going to pull them out of the thin air, but I think they're one of the highest labour costs now.
Yeah.
Especially in the emergency services. I can certainly speak from the fire services. A lot of people off on stress, and crikey, I mean, paramedics. Average length of their career is 5 years now. It's a really dramatic, difficult, admirable job, but stress. Lots of people off with stress.
Yeah. So if, say, you were off with stress and you were going through a disciplinary or grievance process, but you still wanted to be able to participate, there's nothing stopping you from asking your employer to make what we call reasonable adjustments. So that might be allowing you to bring your partner or a friend along to the meeting with you, even if it's just for a bit of moral support. Frequent breaks during the meeting is another thing.
Would there be some explicit instruction that they are not to actively participate in it, though?
Yeah.
They're not speaking on your behalf, and they are
exactly
can't give their opinion.
Yeah, exactly. They're there for moral support.
Which is probably a bit like...
Which differs from the legal right to a trade union rep or a colleague attending, because they do have the legal right to be there, and what they can do is they can make representations on your behalf and things like that.
How do we define a colleague? I mean, that might sound a silly question.
Is basically just anyone that you work with.
What if I worked with them 10 years ago and I don't work with them anymore?
Well, no,
they're retired.
Be a current colleague, an existing
within
colleague.
the same
within the service,
business or service as you.
Yes.
So I couldn't say, I want my mate firefighter from Lancashire to attend because he's my best mate and I went to school with him.
I don't think so, and I don't think it'd be that practical if, depending on where.
He probably knows very little about your service and the working.
Exactly.
The example that's happened. What value could he add to it? He could tell you were a great guy at primary school, but that's not really relevant now.
Exactly.
Today's podcast was brought to you by our friends over at Willingwood Watches. On the 27th of April, Willingwood Watches launched their new limited edition watch, the Bronze Triumph Jubilee. This was launched to celebrate the Queen's Jubilee this year, and it's the first time ever they have produced a bronze version of their beloved Swiss-made Triumph collection. They are using specially repurposed purple hose, that's easy for me to say, and still keeping it in keeping with the bronze Swiss-made chronograph watch. There is no better way to commemorate the Queen's Jubilee with that plum violet, but of course you can get your combination of the straps as well. They've got the red, the blue, the yellow, the green. I'm sure you are well aware of Willingwood Watches. They make those incredible luxury watches from upcycled firefighting equipment. They have been with us since the very origins of the podcast, and you can find out more from them by heading over to willingwoodwatches.com. Now back to the show.
A trade union rep is always going to take a more active involvement in a meeting than a colleague would. Colleagues generally just go along to the meeting with someone as moral support. If you're taking a trade union rep with you, though, then they do have the right to put forward points on your behalf. They can't answer questions on your behalf, etc. But you can definitely confer with them during the meeting. If you need a break at any point to kind of regroup on anything, then you can request that. So, I mean, if you are a member of a union, definitely take a union rep along with you. And they can, at the very least, they can act as a minute taker for you.
I did want to ask you, and I know I'm going to be the worst interviewer ever because I'm going to keep going in so many different directions while you're trying to stick to a theme. We said about recordings briefly, and I wanted to ask. So obviously, yes, in the meeting, you have to have permission to record it. But if as a piece of, and I know I'm going to use the word evidence, and it might be completely inappropriate because it may not be that. If I say I've actually got a recording of you swearing at me, or you know that phone call where you called me a dick or used that abusive language. I've got a recording of that. I didn't have your permission to record that phone call. Can I use that?
In short, yes.
You can.
We call them covert recordings. So
that's got to be scary if one of your employees runs a podcast.
Yeah, it's actually more common than you think.
I bet it is bloody common.
Because people can take
record it on your phone quite easily
into a meeting, and I mean, any good employer will ask the employee at the start of a disciplinary or grievance, "Can we just check that no one's recording this meeting?" But then people don't always tell.
But they can still do it.
They can still do it anyway. And actually, if it goes all the way to like an employment tribunal hearing, say someone is dismissed for gross misconduct, and they then bring an unfair dismissal claim. Is often not that an attractive argument for an employer to say, "Oh, but we didn't agree to the recording," if actually the recording contained highly relevant information that, yes, the employer doesn't want anyone to know.
I know I don't know anything, but I can't think of a reason why it wouldn't be okay. Because at no point when you're at your place of work should you be acting in a way that would conflict with any current HR, behavioural, conduct, policies. So whether I was recording you or not should be largely bloody irrelevant.
Yeah,
you shouldn't have been doing it just because I caught you doing it.
I mean, I wouldn't ever advise an employee to record a meeting covertly. If, however, I don't know, they go to an investigation meeting at the beginning of a disciplinary process and actually they get the minutes afterwards and the minutes are really poor that the employer's taken and it misses off a lot of
they consider
key information,
stuff,
and you just don't have any faith that the minutes that they take at the subsequent disciplinary hearing will be any good, and or that they might actually make further discriminatory comments or something. I think if you were to explain that to, say, an employment tribunal, that's why I recorded the meeting covertly, I think they'd have a lot of sympathy with that. If, however, that's not the situation, and actually the minutes of the meeting were very good, and there was nothing said during the meeting that actually wasn't recorded in the minutes, etc., but they make a recording anyway, I don't think that the employee's going to come across as well in that scenario. So the short answer is yes, people definitely do it.
Yeah.
They shouldn't necessarily do it, but even when they do it, it is still admissible as evidence. A tribunal can't just say, "Oh, we're just going to close our eyes and ears to that because it wasn't agreed." It might be breach. This is going a bit out of my area now. It might be breaching some data protection issues. Because obviously you're recording someone without their consent.
Yeah, that's where my head went as well.
But again, if you want to complain to the Information Commissioner's Office about that, that's up to you.
But the majority of, and I know, and again, there's a massive grey area there. So I'm happy to be the one that just tries to wander in the dark with this one, because we have so much CCTV in the UK. I mean, there's a great little sort of percentage thing about when you look at countries. So like China, for example, as a population, are very accepting and acknowledging the fact that they are on camera all of the time. You can tell who the person is by the gait of their walk. So even if they've got a helmet and a mask and a bunny suit on, you can still identify to an extent who that person is. The UK is not quite up there with them, but we are very willing and sort of knowledgeable about the fact that we are on camera most of the time.
Yeah.
Some places in the Middle East hate it. They're really against it because they've had certain dictatorships in the past, even though China's a dictatorship. But to bring that into the work scenario, we know there's CCTV in all of our work. So surely I would have thought, and again, I don't know at all, somewhere within your contract, it must relate to, or even if it's not written down, UK legislation, UK law must acknowledge the fact that to an extent you are willing to be recorded in some fashion by being at work. Because I mean, on that, for example, let's roll it back to the fire service. We've got 6 cameras on all of our fire engines. We've got cameras all around our fire stations. There's equipment in our meeting rooms that has the capability to record. So you know it might happen.
And we're monitored a lot more than that in terms of like emails and everything. Our employer through their IT department could access anyone's computer if they wanted to. And again, if you're looking at stuff online that you shouldn't be, or sending emails that are inappropriate, I don't think it's a particularly attractive argument to start them playing the "I haven't consented to you accessing it." Well, you shouldn't be doing it in the first place, really. The same with CCTV footage. I mean, I think often employees know know that they're cameras, so they're almost, by not objecting to it, impliedly consenting to being recorded. Again, if there is relevant CCTV evidence of someone stealing something at work, then an employer is definitely entitled to rely on that. And an employment tribunal would want to see it as well.
I wonder if, and I know I'm going to continue to give you a bunch of scenarios through this thing where you'll go, I'm not sure, Pete, that's you're just throwing that one out of the blue. But for example, again, we have cameras on, lots of paramedics have them on their ambulances, police have their body worn, we have our cameras on all of our fire engines. If you're at an incident where another colleague approaches you and they're not on duty, and this has happened, I know it to have happened, and uses language about another person on the fire engine, or uses language about you, or the way you're doing your job, or whatever, and the service has took that individual, even though they're not on duty, they're in their civilian clothing, but they've approached the fire engine, they've approached the individual, and because they think because they are off duty, they think they can behave however they please.
Yeah.
And they have been disciplined for it, and they've made the mistake, well, I'm not at work, I'll do whatever the hell I like.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can do, you do have more freedom when you're not at work, but then if you're approaching someone who is at work and saying discriminatory things about them, etc., and then they're expecting them to, they're then expecting to be able to then go back into that workplace and work with that colleague, I think then the employer's got an obligation to deal with that, whether it's in or outside of work or not. So yeah, I think you'd have to be careful.
Because with stuff like that, and then also with stuff like physical abuse.
Yeah.
Physical abuse is very, very little, very few and far between, because people kind of we don't do that anymore. But when they do happen, because it is the severity of something like physical violence, where does employment law stop and, I'm going to say civil law? Criminal, law begin? Because you punched me in the face and you didn't stop, so we got the police on the fire station to break it up and take you away.
Yeah.
There'd be an employment law case and a criminal law case.
Yeah,
or
definitely.
Which one takes... I imagine criminal law takes precedence.
Well, the police will only be interested in the criminal side of it. So what the employer does with the employee in terms of whether they sack them or give them a warning or do nothing, the police won't be interested in. So the two processes will very much go in tandem but separately to each other. Okay. And likewise, if the police decide not to press charges for whatever reason, lack of evidence or whatever, it doesn't mean that the employer can't deal with it themselves in the way that they want to. Yeah. So the two things...
The extent of which is they can sack them, they can't.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what else. They couldn't do much else to them.
I mean, the what we call the burden of proof in criminal cases and like civil employment cases is very different. So in the criminal case, you've got to prove that they've committed the offence beyond all reasonable doubt, which basically means like you've not got to have any reasonable doubt in your mind that they did it. In employment, it's not like that. You just got to have a reasonable belief.
Oh,
from
really?
A reasonable investigation. So it's a very objective test.
It's a bit looser.
Yeah, it is a lot looser. Yeah, because ultimately an
maybe
employer,
that's why there's such an uproar.
Possibly.
Not uproar, but like more tomfoolery.
Yeah.
I need to use a better term than that. Yeah. More of that takes place because they're like, no, dude, I'm pretty sure it was you.
Yeah. I mean, as long
We've
as
had
they've done
stuff.
a reasonable investigation.
A guy went to the fire station. He was caught on camera, and he fueled up his vehicle at the fire station fueling place. And he had some dogs, and the dogs jumped out of the boot of the car. They ran round. They got back in the car. Nothing happened as a result of it, even though it got reported and blah blah blah.
So what had he done wrong there?
He'd stolen the fuel.
Oh, he'd not paid for the fuel. Okay.
So you can't buy fuel from fire stations.
Yeah.
It's for the appliances only. This individual had done that, and to my knowledge, because it was a bit not great footage, you couldn't tell the number plate, but the rough look of the person, the vehicle, the fact that everybody knows the vehicle as it is, the person works there. Person has these dogs, or they had those.
Wouldn't
dogs
take a genius to work.
It's not. It's a fairly tangible thread, but it was like I couldn't identify the individual. You're like, really? For me, that sits in the.
I suspect
it's a reasonable accusation to make because of X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
We believe that to be you.
Whoever was investigating liked the person or needed them.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, I can't really comment on that.
No, I know you can't, and I probably shouldn't, but nonetheless.
Just one other right
Take me
you
back,
get during a disciplinary process, whatever the outcome, whether it's the first written warning, final, or dismissal, you always get the right to appeal the decision, and I would always recommend doing that. Often it doesn't change the outcome because the employer's made their decision based on certain evidence and is an appeal
Unless you're going to present
manager.
something new.
Exactly, yeah. Is it likely to change things? But I would always do it anyway because you've got the right. It might change the decision. And
Can you do it indefinitely? Or you just do it once?
So just one. Well, unless your employer has a disciplinary policy that allows for more than one right of appeal, generally under employment law you just have the one right. So you can't appeal an appeal, otherwise it just wouldn't end.
I feel like you can do that in some criminal law. And I know I don't know. You know a lot more than me, but I know you don't work in that field particularly. But some stuff keeps getting brought up years and years and years and years later.
That's appealing court decisions.
Okay.
This is appealing your employer's decision to dismiss you or give you a warning or something like that. So yeah, just generally one right of appeal, unless your employer's disciplinary policy has the right of two rights. And the appeal manager should be someone who hasn't been involved in the case prior to that. So they're coming in completely fresh, and they should at least be at the same level as the disciplinary manager, or ideally more senior, so that they've got the authority to overrule their decision if that is indeed what they do.
And also no subconscious biases to be like, well, I don't want to piss off the boss.
Yes.
Yeah, this person's higher than me. What if they sit in front of me in an interview panel at some point and they don't like me because I went against them in disciplinary?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Prior to attending any disciplinary hearing, you should your employer would do an investigation into the allegations. So prior to you attending the disciplinary, you'd want to be given a copy of any evidence that's been gathered during the investigation, and obviously just know what the allegations are against you. And
if you're not presented with that information,
if you're not, then you would request it, and if they still didn't send it to you. I mean, they're not doing themselves any favours if they end up dismissing you, because you would then bring an unfair dismissal claim in the tribunal.
I feel like so many of them go wrong because we get the first few steps wrong. And this is why I wanted to have a sit down with you, because so many managers in my position do the first bits wrong because we don't, the disciplinary procedure is not a really appealing thing. You don't want to have to read it ever.
Yeah.
But when you need it at short notice.
Yeah.
So you need to get off on the right foot, informing the right people, respecting their rights in the right way.
Yeah.
So capturing the evidence and making sure everyone can have access to the same stuff.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be a perfect investigation. No investigation ever is, but it just has to be a reasonable one. So look at the disciplinary policy that you're going through. Well, this is whether you're an employer actually conducting the meeting or the employee attending the hearing. Read the employer's disciplinary policy, because that will set out the steps and the procedures that will apply in that process.
So with regard to unions and HR, I wanted to just get a bit of clarity on that. You say they can attend sooner than an employment lawyer can attend.
Well, yeah.
Where do they sit in the hierarchy of everything? How relevant are they? What? And I know each union might have different powers, but what's the power?
I mean, I think that a union at a disciplinary or grievance hearings is really useful, because they'll have been to countless hearings like that before. They've got your best interests at heart. They'll know your employer's policies inside out, back to front and sideways. They can act as a minute taker, moral support. They can put points forward on your behalf. If it does go to an employment tribunal hearing, they can potentially be a witness for you at the to give evidence on what was discussed, anything like that. In terms of what their powers are during the meeting, it's nothing too outlandish. It's basically that they're able to put points forward on your behalf, but they can't answer questions on your behalf or things like that. Some union reps take more of an active participation in a meeting than others. Other employees, they're actually quite capable of putting forward their own points. Some employees don't feel that comfortable, so they kind of pass the baton a little bit over to their rep. If I was talking to an employer about this, I would kind of let whoever wants to speak. Yeah. If you try and be too militant over it and say, oh no, you can't put forward that point, we want to hear it from them, it just disrupts the meeting, really.
It slows the flow of it.
Exactly. And
you have to assume they're acting in their best interest. If the individual wants to object, they're going to need to object. If they don't...
I mean, if the rep is being obstructive and is disrupting the meeting, then obviously the employer then has the right to ask them to leave and adjourn the meeting.
That's not unheard of.
Yeah.
Certainly I can only speak not of a particular union, but of unions within the fire service, some of them are super militant.
Well, yes.
Especially when it comes to like passing policies and legislations, and yep, they want to fight for our best interests and all that sort of stuff. But some people say, for some of them it expedites it, and some it's like walking through treacle.
Well, yeah, and like with every profession, there'll be good union reps and bad union reps, and good employees, bad employees, good employers, bad employers. So I mean, at the end of the day, when you're going through a disciplinary process, your focus should always be on keeping your job. So if I don't think you want to be, you want to always have that in mind. That
don't damage the relationship to an extent.
Yeah, exactly. Don't behave in such a way at a disciplinary that actually you just make the job of your employer dismissing you easier. Because you've said so much stuff, disparaging stuff about management or whatever, that kind of just confirms the decision that you've got to go.
Could they act on that as well?
Yeah.
For example, if they said, well, you know what? Because is everything that's said within there said within a place of safety? And what I mean by that is you were brought here because you did whatever on a WhatsApp group. That's been found to be unfounded. Well, it's been found not to be the case. However, your behaviour during this process has been unacceptable.
Yeah, it could be.
And we're going to bring you to another disciplinary next week about your behaviour. If you're invited to a disciplinary meeting, you are still in your place of work. So don't walk in there effing and blinding and kicking chairs.
Yes, exactly. Yes, you can actually make it worse for yourself in the disciplinary process. So, I think it's much better to have adult conversations and things like that.
Give me some of the key points. I know you made some notes about the rights of individuals.
Yeah.
I keep talking all over you. I'm terrible at that.
That's okay. So generally, the rights during a disciplinary grievance process are that you've got the right to be accompanied by a trade union rep or a colleague. You can request another third party to attend if you want to, like a family member, but there's no legal obligation on your employer to allow that.
Is there a limit to how many people you're allowed to bring?
I've never known anyone bring anyone more than maybe a rep and a family member, and so I don't
know if anyone want to get the whole gang. I would like to bring my whole watch.
No,
your whole team. Really?
No,
that's not necessary.
No, I don't think so. And
it can feel a little bit overwhelming though, because sometimes, and I've been in these. There's the officer or the person investigating it. They'll have their own colleague.
Yeah. There'll
be a HR.
Yeah.
There'll be the chair of the meeting.
Yeah, you can sometimes have about 5
yeah,
people in a meeting.
And you feel like it's just me and my mate or union rep, and there's 6 of you.
Yeah. Sometimes it can feel a bit like that, but generally you should be given at least 48 hours notice of a meeting, but in reality it is often longer. You should be given details of the allegations and all the evidence that was gathered as part of the investigation process. And whatever the decision, obviously, unless it's completely dropped, if you're given any kind of disciplinary sanction or anything, or you're not happy with the outcome of your employer's investigation into your grievance, you've got the right to appeal that decision as well.
Okay. I wanted to move into a couple of examples, and I know I've made a myriad of notes. Could we start with the world of social media?
Yeah.
Because that is a very sticky wicket, and we'll include within that WhatsApp, although that might want to be a separate conversation, because I know you and I attend a gym together. There are gym WhatsApp groups, there are work WhatsApp groups, there are friend WhatsApp groups, there's a WhatsApp group for freaking everything for you puppies, sons, parents, kids group. Do you know what I mean? There's a WhatsApp group for everything. Services or organizations, if I worked for microphones.com as an example, and we had a microphones.com WhatsApp group, is that a place for work?
I mean, WhatsApp groups definitely exist. We're all part of them. And generally, I would say that whatever you post on that WhatsApp group, especially if it's with work colleagues, it could potentially get back to your employer. So if you are saying things on there that are, I don't know, discriminatory or amount to bullying or harassment, etc.,
or you're sharing nasty memes, or you're sharing some obscene photo of an obscene act taking place.
Yes, then your employer's got the right to look into that. And in the same way that if you put something on Facebook or something or other social media that was offensive to a certain group of people, and they represented some colleagues in your employer's workforce.
Is that only if you, in some fashion, are representing your service on that platform? So, for example, social media, if you are nowhere on social media do you identify yourself as an employee of microphones.com. You don't mention it. It's not on your profiles. There's no picture of you wearing your microphone.com uniform.
Yeah.
I am not representing you. I am just me saying my own whatever.
Yeah. Well, that's going to help.
Will that hold water?
That would help in a situation like this. The reality is, though, that people are often friends with their colleagues on these social media sites. And if a colleague who sees a post that you've put finds it offensive and reports it to your employer, again, I think your employer's got a kind of an obligation to look into that. I don't think that's gives you just carte blanche to
do whatever you like.
Yeah, exactly.
I always thought the difference, especially within a WhatsApp group, so social media is the world for all intents and purposes, whereas I find WhatsApp group to be a much more obvious offence. And for some, I made a note when I spoke to a few chief fire officers about things we might be useful as discussing. They said it's considered an extension of your workplace. For example, if the WhatsApp group is called WhatsApp Group Microphones.com team, and it only contains members of your team and potentially your line manager or even just members of your team.
Yeah.
That, for all intents and purposes, is an extension.
I would agree.
Of your workplace. And everything you say within that is exactly the same if you were saying it in the tea room, or the coffee room, or the watch table.
Yeah, and what might seem a joke at the time is never comes across as funny when you're having to explain it to your employer during a disciplinary hearing, etc.
Yeah.
So yeah, just be careful. I mean, the reality is
a lot of blank faces as you try to laugh your way through your sentence.
I mean, we are all on these WhatsApp groups, and some banter is healthy and everything. But as long as everyone's finding it funny, it's better. But yeah, you do have to be careful.
When you're getting no non-verbal feedback, you're not seeing the person squint their eyes and go, "What the fuck? What's written that for? Jesus."
Yeah.
Or don't like that. And the way something's written and the way something's read is very different.
Exactly.
I send a lot of messages quickly. I'm like, and I send a lot of audio messages because I've made mistakes sending written messages where I'm like, yeah, probably not today. See you tomorrow. And so people are like, it's a bit blunt. I'm like, I was just like picking the kids up or whatever, so I'm just trying to get back to you. So I try and send an audio message because it sounds less abrupt. But yeah, the way things are read and written are very, very different. And I suppose in the difference between chatting in the tea lounge or whatever, that can be screenshotted. It can be. Can I request your phone?
I mean, what would normally happen is
somebody's probably already presented the information.
Someone would present screenshots of the messages to your employer, and then that will probably be the evidence. It's not CSI where they send the phone off for analysis. If it looks like a message, it sounds like a message, it probably is a message that was sent on WhatsApp.
And as soon as they go, "Are you in that group?" and you go, "No," and they go, "Well, there's a screenshot of your name in the group." That's not me. Is that your phone number? No. We've got it on our records that says it's your phone number. So either we've had the records wrong for the last 14 years.
Yeah.
If I rang that number now...
and that goes back to the point where your employer just has to do a reasonable investigation.
Okay, so at some point, even if you keep saying no, they go...
But if they've
I appreciate you
got
saying that, we're going to consider that it is your phone number.
Yeah, exactly. And they've got reasonable grounds for thinking that because the numbers match, it's your name that's linked to it.
We've contacted you on it in the past.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever.
Yeah, then I think that would be fine.
Then we're going to move on to the next point because we're assuming that is what it is. So now let's get back to what it is we believe that person said, and then we believe that person to be you.
Yeah.
God, what a horrible conversation.
Yeah.
I've not been there.
Yeah. So I generally wouldn't put anything on a WhatsApp or Facebook or anything that you weren't happy to say to the person in person.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's probably the best piece of advice.
If it feels stupid, it probably is.
Yeah, exactly.
If you have to if you're smirking too much when you write it, don't put it publicly.
Yeah. And if you're having a rant and you type a message out, just don't send it straight away. Wait till tomorrow, and I guarantee you'll probably delete the message without sending it.
I always say write it in your notes as well.
Yeah.
Because if you write it in the thing of the group, it's very easy to send it by accident, and then you're not sure who's seen it or hasn't seen it. You try and withdraw it. What a colossal...
Yes.
Yeah. Beautiful. We spoke a little bit about sickness earlier.
Yes.
Now, I know this might be a really rubbish question to ask you because every service or every employment will probably have different rules around sick leave. When can we force people to come back to work, especially now we're looking at post-COVID times and stuff like that? If I kept saying, I want to keep working from home, you can't make me, or... I'm sick. I don't want to come in. I'm not coming in.
Well, just talking about sick leave generally, you'd have to get medical evidence, like a fit note from your GP.
Yeah, so, I don't know where we're up to with that these days, though. That's changed a lot in the last year.
Yes.
It was a sick note Then it was no sick note at all. You needed a fit note. And now it was like it went from 7 days self-approved to 10. I have no idea what we are.
Well, fit notes are now what used to be called sick notes. So they're the same thing.
Okay.
They definitely relaxed the rules on when you needed to get a fit note during COVID. So you didn't need to provide one to show that you couldn't come to work because you tested positive, etc.
Yeah.
In terms of general sickness, so to say you're off with, I don't know, bad back or something.
Yeah, you broke your leg.
You do still need a fit note for that. Not for the first, I think,
What does a fit note do?
So a fit note is basically a piece of paper from your GP that they fill in, just basically saying you're not fit for work for a month or something, and then you've got that piece of paper that you would provide to your employer.
Or when that runs out, if you haven't got another
When
one.
that runs out, it can either be extended, and then, or if it's not extended, and the colleague thinks that they're fit to return to work, the employer should really meet with them to discuss their fitness for work.
Back to work.
Can they come back straight away? Do they want a phased return? Do they need any adjustments to their physical workstation? Or
What if they just said, I want to come back?
I don't want to come back.
Yeah.
If they said they didn't want to come back, but they were fit to come back, they'd
Yeah.
basically be AWOL then.
We've had that quite a few
Yeah,
times. We've
and
also
then
had
that
it
is a
where
disciplinary
somebody
issue.
books fit halfway through a shift. And this is a little bit case-by-case management thing, and this is some managers just being a bit of a dick, where they're like, hey, dude, I think I'm going to be in tomorrow. I'm feeling a lot better.
Yeah.
It's like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. But the shift we're on today doesn't finish till 7. So they ring their control staff, the person, because it's my sickness, I have to declare it. I ring my control staff and say, hey, I'm fit for duty. I'll be back in tomorrow.
Yeah.
That goes on to our electronic thing. But if they're not at work now, then for the next 3.5 hours, they're considered absent without leave.
Yeah.
And people go, and I've had managers ring them, and they go, are you coming into work, or are you taking leave? Are you taking toil? Are you taking hours?
Yeah.
And they're like, well, no, I'm coming in tomorrow. But you fit.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
I think that's a bit. That sounds a bit pedantic.
It is
really.
pedantic.
I'd probably start each day as a new day.
Yeah.
So if otherwise you're just
I'm
talking.
feeling a bit better, but I don't want to wait till midnight tonight to ring. I'm just going to ring now.
Exactly.
And say I'll be in work tomorrow.
Yeah, I'll be in work tomorrow.
Because in most places, like in most external employment, that'd be fine. People
Yeah.
get that. There's something weird about a 24-hour emergency service that we timestamp everything. Because some of our shifts start at much later in the day. Some people start halfway through the night with certain sectors.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a bad example. But I've seen it happen, and I'm like, dude, you can't do that. Just ignore it. Not ignore it, but like they're off.
Exactly.
They're back in
yeah.
tomorrow.
Just see them tomorrow. A whole new
But it
day.
says I've got to put something down as to why they're not here now because they're sick. But they're not sick. They're sick.
Yeah, they're sick until tomorrow.
Sick until tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, and once someone does return to work from sick leave, really their employer should have like weekly meetings with them to see how they're getting on. It depends what they've been off with. If they've been off with a bad cold, they're probably not going to have the same need for that than if they've been off for 6 months with a bad back, which
Or also like echoing back
all
to stress and mental health.
Yeah,
though.
exactly. Yeah.
Someone can just have, and I hope I don't use the word Tom, but someone can have a wobble.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh shit, they're 2 months off again.
Yeah.
That has got to be one of the hardest things for
It
employers
is, yeah.
now, because then you start, and we should invest in mental health, absolutely. But should we all be having in-house counsellors and massive
It's
cost.
difficult, yeah. And with mental health, you can't see it. If someone's got one leg, you know they're disabled. You know they're not fit to maybe do some parts of the job. But when someone's got work-related stress, then that's often a harder thing to deal with, really. But
where does that extend to as well, though? And I know I'm going into muddy waters here, but I'm like, if you're just struggling with your life at the minute, your life's just not very good. You're not winning the game of life at the minute, and you're not managing things outside of it. Like COVID, for example, people have felt 17,000 different ways about it, and then on top of that, their own personal life, how they react to social media and their partner and their children and whatever. The work might not be the problem.
Yeah.
But the way you're living your life is stopping you coming to work.
Yeah.
Are we performance and capability there? And if I wanted to raise a case against you and say, no, dude, that's where you get into patterns of sickness, isn't it? Where you're like, well, you're having the same amount of time every month now.
Yeah. Yeah,
We've given you some support, but
Exactly. It'd definitely be a capability issue if someone's not fit for work for whatever reason. And yes, your employer should be supportive, but ultimately they can only do so much. And if it's causing issues in the workplace in terms of covering your work and
that's a big problem, isn't it?
And then being unable to recruit someone permanently because they don't know if and when you're going to come back.
Yeah.
Then
we're still paying you.
Yeah.
Still got a job. But like we have struggle with, for example, drivers. So drivers on fire engines, we have to have one driver per fire engine. Driving is not a required skill, nor do you get paid additionally for it.
Yeah.
So some people are raising their hands now saying like, well, it's unfair. I can't get leave because I've got a driving skill set. And that's what they say with throwing in your tickets. People throw the driver ticket in because they're like, well, I won't drive then. You can't make me drive. You're not paying me any more money for it. Yes, you paid for my driving course, but you know what? I don't want to drive now. And then it's like, so Seb's not a driver. You want today off, but Dave asked first. But Dave's a driver, so he has to stay because he's got. And all of this is happening because John Smith is off on sick.
Well,
and he's a driver, and you're like, and that person then starts to hate that person.
Yes.
You know, they have ill feel because they're like, well, John Smith's taking the piss.
Yeah.
You know, I can't get any time off because he won't come back to work. You know what? I'm not driving anymore. Forget it.
Yeah.
I don't even think I've asked you a question there. Sorry, but that's like a...
No, I understand what the issue is, yeah.
You're like, I can't force anybody to drive. I can't employ another driver because he's off sick. I need to manage that person's sickness. And, you know, how soon can you get to the point where you're like, you don't appear to be willing to come back to work?
Yeah. I mean, there's no magic...
Trigger.
Date.
No.
Yeah, so it's not like after you've been off for 3 months, your employer can dismiss you or anything.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I mean, some people are off for a year or more.
Yeah.
And if they're fit, if they've still got a fit note from their GP, and they're saying, "Well, look, I'm awaiting an operation, and then after that, I'll be fit to come back," then it's often more difficult for an employer to dismiss in that situation compared to if an employee just says, "Actually, I'm not fit to come back now or in the future." Misconduct's often a much easier thing for an employer to deal with because it's often a quicker, shorter process. Whereas managing sickness absence, whether it's long-term or short-term or intermittent or continuous, is a real headache for an employer.
I suppose there is because I forgot for a second there that I'm not obligated to continue to pay you either. When does things like statutory kick in? Because some employers like pay for ages. I used to work for a company local to us, really great employer, and they would pay you full sick leave, almost indefinitely.
Yeah,
which I thought was stupid.
Yeah,
great, but also stupid.
Yeah, because it often
there's no incentive for me to come back to work.
Exactly, it often encourages people to stay off.
Yeah,
and
but then when you go to statutory, you soon start feeling the squeeze.
Yes,
you're like, I'm not back to work.
Well, the statutory sick pay, I think, is only payable for 33 weeks or something like that, and it's actually quite a nominal payment. So it's nowhere near what you would normally get per week.
Oh, and even that can only go for 33 weeks.
Yes, I think it's around
after that they get nothing.
weeks. After that, they would get nothing. Yeah.
Wow.
They still accrue holiday pay whilst they remain off. But
I know somebody that did that. Not they didn't do it like maliciously, but like various questions about why they were sick. But then they came back and they had loads of
holiday
leave.
Yeah.
And you're like,
you still accrue holiday whilst you're on sick leave. In the same way you do if you're on maternity leave, you still accrue it. So you can take it.
Is there any realistic process for employers to ever get that removed? That must be a legislative change somewhere.
Yeah,
but I'd be trying to write that out of the employment.
It's capped
contract.
at 18 months worth of holiday, so you can't accrue more than a year and a half, basically.
Which is a lot, though.
Still a lot.
I mean, it's 21 days in the fire service minimum.
Yeah.
I think you get an extra 3 days for long-term service, so you could be getting 40 plus days off.
Yeah.
Which when you're only working a 224, that's my maths is terrible. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's about 7 sets.
Yes.
That's another few months off.
Yeah, when you've already been off for a long time because of sick.
Yeah. And you're entitled to it.
Yes.
God, that's a mistake.
Yeah.
That is a bit of a Mickey take.
But you do have the right to be kept in touch with whilst you're on sick leave, and equally you've got the right to keep in touch with your employer. And I would definitely encourage that because you are still employed by them. So if they're wanting to have a weekly catch up with you, even if it's just over the phone or whatever, just to see how you are, I would engage in that conversation because you are still employed by them. And the whole point of being off should always be with the intention of coming back.
Yeah.
That should always be the focus. If your employer ever did want to terminate your employment, though, they would always want to get up-to-date medical evidence on your fitness for work at the point of your dismissal. So if you got referred for, I don't know, a medical appointment maybe 6 months earlier and things might have changed since then you would want to be re-referred, basically.
It must be so hard for an employer to ask let's stay within the realm of mental health for a second, a mental health professional to say, and I'm sure maybe a mental health professional wouldn't even like this conversation when they're saying, how realistic is Seb gonna? Is he making? Can you show me he's made any improvement? And if so, like, how long do I have to wait to ask that question? Because if I'm like, he's been off 2 days, he made any improvement? Well, give him a bit of time.
I mean, usually people
but after
are off
2 years or 18 months,
Yeah.
they're like, he doesn't look. He keeps saying, maybe next month.
Yeah.
But he's not coming back to work.
Yeah.
I want to employ someone else. How do I do that?
Yeah. I mean, usually people are off for at least a month before they start getting referred for medical appointments to get a report.
That's too long.
Yeah. Well, it depends what they're off for. Generally. I mean, everyone always thinks that they'll be back quite quickly, so the first week or two is eaten up with that.
Yeah.
And then by the time you make the referral and they attend the appointment and you get the report back, it often is a month anyway.
Yeah.
But often reports will be quite woolly. I mean,
If somebody
ultimately, they
says,
don't know.
I want to come back,
Yeah.
do you have an obligation to seek some sort of medical? Or can you just go, Seb says it's fine.
Yeah.
I trust you have a good awareness of your own mental and physical capability.
Fit notes from a GP just say whether you're fit for work or not. So if they sign you off for a month, for example, and that month ends, you don't need to go back to your GP to get another fit note to say you're now fit for work. So unless the employer's got a reasonable reason to think, well, you're clearly not fit to come in which case they probably medically suspend you whilst they got another report on your fitness.
Why can't I just sit down with you and just go, you're all right then?
Yeah.
You fine?
And often
Well,
people
I don't
do...
know. I feel like I'm fine, but the scan didn't really show much, did it? But how do you feel? Do you want to come back to work?
And
And
most people do return to work from sick leave without difficulty.
it's never the most that caused the problem, though, is it?
Exactly,
It's the
yeah.
few.
1% of the population take up 99% of your time.
Absolutely.
But often occupational health reports or GP reports, they will be quite woolly because ultimately the doctor doesn't know exactly how long it's going to take you to come back for work.
Yeah, but you're the medical... not you, but they're the medical professional. Because I see lots of stuff that says at the line manager's decision. I'm like, I'm not a medical professional.
Yeah, they often try and put the ball back in
I'm
your
waiting
court.
for you to say, Seb is fine.
Yeah.
I can see no medical physical reason why Seb cannot perform the role that you have described to me that he does.
That would be a good clear report, but often they'll say they're not fit at the moment, but they may be fit in 1 to 3 months' time, and we recommend a further referral. And then the employer's like, well, where do we go with that?
What's that mean?
It doesn't take us any further forward. And they're probably the most difficult cases to manage. But
There's a lot of them. Like,
100%.
I know of a lot.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know how we get further beyond that, though.
Yeah.
At the minute, it frustrates me.
Yeah.
Today's episode is supported by our good friends over at Duty Crew Coffee. Now, as you're probably aware, coffee is the most popular drink worldwide, with over 2.25 billion cups of coffee consumed every single day, and over 70 million of those in the UK alone. Most of this is consumed in our crew rooms, our watch offices, and by our emergency services frontline staff. So when you're getting together around the mess table, don't be drinking no nasty-ass cheap coffee. Nobody likes that guy that brings the cheap stuff. Life is too short to be drinking crap coffee. So if you head on over to dutycrew.co.uk or click the link in the podcast below, you'll be able to jump on over and see the Duty Crew coffee products. They come in 227 gram oversized high quality recyclable standard pouches, and they are individually wrapped 10 gram coffee bags. They're quick, mess free, convenient. They have a one-way degassing valve, which is an absolute must for storage of freshly roasted coffee. You can get the 20-pack response bag. They've got the HQ, they've got the No Duff, they've got the Unity, the Decaf, and of course all of their products are Rainforest Alliance certified, Fair Trade Foundation, and most importantly, they taste freaking epic. I started drinking Duty Crew about 2 months ago, and then when I fell in love with it, I got in contact with them and they came on board with the podcast. So jump on over to Duty Crew Coffee if you want some of the good stuff. Now back to the podcast.
So I wanted to ask you next about working hours. So this is a very sort of poignant thing, certainly with emergency services, because we work all the time. no more or less than anybody else, but we can work silly shifts, we can work overtime. Certainly from a firefighting perspective, we can work what we call whole time and on call, sometimes considered retained, sometimes considered volunteer. So for me, example, I did 10 years on call whilst also working whole time. So I would do a 12-hour shift, and then I would go straight onto being available for my on-call duties. Now, some people always used to say to me, that's illegal. But I'm like, well, firefighters been doing it for, I don't know, 70 years, longer, probably. It must be legal. And then also there's a follow-up question, and I don't want to ask too many in the same way. We have a day crew and plus system. I don't know if you've ever heard that term. 24-hour shifts. I'm going to get this wrong, so I apologise to anybody listening. You can do a maximum of 4. I think in some places you can do 5 in a row. I think it is 5. You can do 5 24-hour shifts in a row, but you only do a maximum of 15. And I'm not trying to get clever with numbers here, but 24-hour shifts, working on and off. What is considered? Because the reason this thing got kicked out, this day crew and 24-hour shifts, because they said it's illegal. European work time regulations, it's illegal. I was like, well, we're already doing it.
Yeah.
And people want to do it.
I mean, I think if people want to do it, who's likely to complain about it is,
But when is
the
it
big
become
question.
abuse? Like, if I said to you, I'll work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You pay me, I'll work.
Well, an employer shouldn't be allowing that because under the working time regulations, there are obligations an employer's got to allow for rest breaks, daily rest, weekly rest between shifts. That will vary from
But
employer
if I provide
to
you with a
employer.
place of rest at work, for example, firefighters in a lot of services still go to bed
Yeah.
for a number of hours in the evening.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I'll pay you. I'll pay you if you want to come. I'll
Yeah.
pay you. I'll pay the same rate. You just sleep on the fire station, or you sleep at the ambulance station, or you sleep at the power station, wherever you do as work.
I mean, sometimes even we're going on to a slightly different conversation there, but sometimes that kind of rest at work can be classified as work if you're not at your own kind of disposal. So you've got to stay in or around the fire station. You could be called upon at any time.
That's exactly
and
where
that's
that happened.
why that's why the employer pays them for it, because it is actually classified as working time. So working time can't be rest time. So you would need to pick up that rest elsewhere during the week. Every employer will be different. The fire service will definitely be different because of the sort of 24-hour nature of the industry. But generally, under employment law, an employee's got the right not to work more than 48 hours in 1 week. Having said that, they can opt out of that.
48 hours?
48 hours in a week. But they can opt out of that. So there's nothing stopping an employee from basically working more than 48 hours a week. And in fact, obviously many employees do.
I remember seeing a great meme, and I forget what it was, but it was like when someone goes, I work a 48-hour week, and then the other side of it is, yeah, I remember my first part-time job. I'm like, 48 hours a week? Dude, that's nothing. You know what I mean? What do you do with the rest of your time?
Yes.
I know I have an addictive personality, so I work for probably some people, I probably work too much. But 40 hours doesn't sound like a lot. You know, there's 168 hours in a week.
Yeah.
48 is not a lot.
Yeah. But then again, we work to live, not live to work. So,
we should do. It depends if you enjoy what you do, though, dude.
Exactly. Well, if you enjoy what you do, you'll never work another day in your life.
I tell people I haven't worked a day in like 8 years, but that can also then can be considered, you could abuse that person in that way as well.
Yeah.
Like if you've got a person who has they've got no family, no friends, no whatever, and they're like, oh, I just want to work all the time. And they're like, yeah, but it's probably not in the best health for you to be at work 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
And can I stop you? Because I know in some services and in some contracts, you have to declare outside work.
Yes. Yeah.
Because if you're coming to work and you just seem like you're knackered.
Yeah. And that's basically so your employer can monitor how many hours you're working each week. And that's not just hours for them, but hours for other employers as well. So yeah, if you do have work elsewhere, you should always declare it to your employer, because there might, in some circumstances, in your employment contract, it will probably say that if you work elsewhere, you need to let us know.
For mine, it says you should.
Yeah,
but I know a lot of people don't have that.
Well, yeah, from a working time perspective, so your employer can keep a track on how many hours you're doing. They should be aware. In some other respects, maybe not necessarily for the fire service, it's to monitor whether there's any conflict of interests. So if you're working for one employer and then you might be working for a competitor, that's clearly there's going to be more issues with that.
So back to the on-call analogy. If I'm doing... So for some people, they will do, I think the minimum contract for on-calls these days is like 32 hours. So if you're a whole-time firefighter, you're doing a 224, it's an 8-day rotation, 2 12-hour days, 2 12-hour nights, 4 off. So it's an 8-day rotation, not a week.
Yeah.
Which adds a whole nother tough calculation in your head anyway.
Yeah.
But let's assume you're therefore you're not doing 48 hours a week on your whole time. You're probably doing 36.
Yeah.
Maybe 38. Anyway, let's say 38. And then you're also doing 38 for the same organisation on an on-call perspective. We're over though. So
Well, yeah, you'd have to opt out.
You're opting out.
And to opt out is easy.
If you opt out, can you do the whole 168?
You could, subject to your employer making sure you have adequate rest breaks between certain shifts.
Considered an adequate rest
Well,
break?
that is a whole area in itself.
Whole
And
kettle of fish.
Off the top of my head, I don't know the exact numbers, but certainly every week you should be having at least one rest day.
Okay.
And then there has to be a certain amount of hours rest between shifts as well. I think that is around 12 hours. But again, the fire service will be different.
And again, I don't know if it's an opt-out thing, but for example, in my service, and again, I don't share which service I work for, but people will work a night shift, 12 hours, and then immediately go and could be an instructor for the day.
Yeah.
Because we need an instructor to run a course. So I'll finish my work at 7 a.m., my night shift, and then at 8 a.m. or 9 a.m., I'm just going to basically drive from where I am to where we're running the course.
Yeah.
And I'll do a day worth of instructing, then I'll come back and work my second night shift.
Yeah.
Everybody know they do that. Nobody says there's anything wrong with it. I don't think that there's anything wrong with it. I think there's two things. When people think there's something wrong with it, sometimes it's just jealousy because obviously that person's earning a lot more money. But then also there is a welfare factor at a certain point. You're hoping you have a quiet night. If you don't, I as an employer are actively letting you do that.
Yeah.
Even if you've opted out, but you're also not having enough rest.
Yeah. There's definitely a balance, isn't there, between what an employee's happy to do and what the employer's willing to allow. I dare say there's a lot more working time regulation breaches than you perhaps think.
Yeah.
And no one wants to get too pernickety about hours, do they? I can't start then, but I'll start an hour later because then...
I think where we opened up Pandora's box is with these 24-hour shifts, which is not, for people listening in different countries, is not going to be a revelation. They've done that for a long time in different countries. But for us, something about this Day Crew Plus model, and I'm going to have to get a union representative on because I don't know enough about it, even though I've probably sat in several meetings about it. Because people want to do it.
Yeah.
But I think there's lots of people that don't like, they get a 27% pay enhancement, probably more or less. I'm sure I've got that wrong. But they want to do it. The services want them to do it. It saves money, but there's that. And they're opting out.
Yeah, but then no one's likely to complain about it. So those sort of cases
But it's now deemed illegal.
Yeah.
They've got to take it out.
Yeah.
Or a lot of services across the UK have got in the next 3 years or something, and they must
take it out.
Yeah, must take action.
Yeah.
They kind of treaded water for 2 years.
Yeah.
And then the Majesty's Inspector said, no, you're not doing anything about it. Do something about it or I'm going to give you a fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now they have to do something, but I still can't quite get my head around why it's illegal.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's because, what the laws that apply in this country won't necessarily apply the rest of the world. And some countries, employment doesn't really exist. So, yeah, people just work and work and work. But over here, an employer's got a duty to safeguard employees both physically and mentally. If they had an accident whilst driving a fire engine, for example, and it was because they were encouraging the practice of not taking adequate rest breaks, that will have legal implications for them, etc.
I feel like our responsibilities are extending a little bit too far
in
some cases. There's got to be an aspect of personal accountability. You're in charge of your own.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about no win, no fee.
Yeah.
Because that is, with the old terms of ambulance chases and stuff like that. You are a professional that exists and you work for have you ever done, I'm going to talk freelance?
I've never done no win, no fee work before.
Must be worth it for some people, though.
Yeah, for some.
Obviously
you get it more in personal injury cases rather than employment law cases that I deal with.
Yeah, a lot of personal injury happens at work, though.
Yeah, definitely. That's kind of a separate legal area, but you'll get certain law firms that are claimant
Have you been injured
friendly.
at work?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and they'll take on hundreds of cases on a no-win, no-fee.
Yeah.
And even if they only win 25% of them,
Yeah.
they'll still get
they call it breakage, don't they?
Yeah, they'll
They
still get
accept
quite
the cost.
Yeah, exactly.
I imagine they go to whatever step 4. They go, we're not going to go the whole hog with all of them.
Yeah.
Push all of them to step 4, for example. See if there's any meat on the bone, and then drop them.
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
go.
I mean, often they take about a third of the compensation you get. So if it's a high-value claim, it's worth them. They often don't want it going to a final hearing, though, because by that point, they've got to do so much work involved in it that even if they do then win, it's not worth it. So
I ask this because cancer amongst firefighters is very high post their career. And some during their career, unfortunately. A lot of it's said to be down to the contaminants that we are regularly exposed to. And then the argument falls of, how much did you know about how much contaminant I was exposed to? What PPE did you provide me with? Was it good enough? Wasn't it good enough?
Yeah.
Did you know it wasn't good enough? And now that I've got this disease as a result of working for you, it's a bit like the miners of whatever it was. It's a reiteration of that on a potentially larger scale. And we will see some of the outcomes of this already with the Grenfell inquiries. The amount of firefighters and the amount of what they've taken on board. That, to me, seems like an obvious thing for a no-win, no-fee case. But I know the union are all over it as well. Yeah. So that's something that's on our horizon.
Yeah, definitely. And you'll never get rid of these ambulance chasers because... Yeah, there's enough people out there who want to bring a claim and they're willing to act for them, etc.
That's why I thought our conversation is so powerful, because people do that and they'll get fed a bit of a long thread from somebody going, yeah, you've got the right to this, that, and that. And then they sit down with somebody like you eventually and you're like, no.
Yeah. or
I'm sorry that somebody's told you that. That is not applicable to what we are discussing today.
Yeah, or they'll see like a headline in a newspaper saying that someone got paid, I don't know, £100,000 or something, but their facts could be completely
fell off the
different.
And I got $100,000.
Yeah.
Like,
sure, it was more than that. Yeah. And every case is different and everything.
Police. I wanted to ask briefly about, I know not something we discussed before, but I swear to God, I read up recently that now if you take a claim out against a police officer, against them, it's against the individual. It's not against them operating as a service.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know about that. I've never...
It scares the hell out of me.
Yeah.
Because if you're at work operating for, in the efforts of public safety, I'd like to think the police are protecting you.
Yeah.
Well, you're operating outside your procedures.
Yeah.
But even then, I'm at work.
They say go after the person with the deepest pocket, and that will often be the employer. So I dare say most people...
There'd be no point,
Most people would go after the employer as well as an individual, but the reality is if it's an employer that they're still employed by, they probably would back the individual.
But also, if I'm at work when I'm doing it,
exactly,
if I'm at the fire station and you come on station and I punch you in the face, you're going to sue the service. The service can sack me. Then I wouldn't have thought you could come after me as an individual. Or maybe you can.
Well, I think from a criminal point of view, the police would go after you as an individual.
Okay,
but
let's say I stole something from it. It's still a criminal act.
Yeah, but in terms of if you brought some other type of claim, I dare say you would bring a claim against your employer and the individual.
A quick reminder for all of our listeners of our monthly giveaway. Now, as part of our partnership with Hikes, Rosenbauer and Tallyman, we give away that little bit extra to our podcast listeners every single month. You can get 2 personalised BA tallies. These are hardware and they've got your own name on them, they've got your own service number on them, and they have the podcast logo on the back. And then for the juicy stuff, Hikes give away a pair of their incredible footwear. And some of the stuff is pretty expensive stuff, to be honest with you. We try and switch it and change it every month. We are guided by the gods of Hikes to make sure we are giving you exactly what you need for that time of year. So it might be boots, it might be trainers, and then once every quarter our good friends over at Rosenbauer are giving away their Boris B5 firefighting boots as well. So to be in with a chance to win, jump over to our social media platforms or YouTube, where you need to tag a member of the emergency services in the post, be following our page, and you will be in with a chance to win at the end of every single month. Back to the show.
I always say, in terms of bringing any employment tribunal claim, don't bring a claim unless you're willing to go all the way with it. I've seen lots of people before bring a tribunal claim thinking that their employer will just settle it, and then when they don't, for whatever reason, they're then faced with a 5-day final hearing, which they don't want to attend.
What is a tribunal claim?
So an employment tribunal claim can be anything from unfair dismissal, for example, or discrimination. Or
does that not form part of the same procedure? Is that not like you made a decision, I'm going to challenge the decision.
Yeah, so
when does that become a tribunal?
So if you say you're going through a disciplinary process and your employer dismisses you and you think it's unfair, so you might appeal that decision internally, but the appeal's not successful. So you're still dismissed. So you're without a job. You could then bring an employment tribunal claim against your employer in the employment tribunal, and that's the start of a claims process. But generally, it takes.
Is that the point where an employment lawyer would get involved?
Well, you wouldn't have to. So you could represent yourself during the whole proceedings, or you could get someone to represent you, like a lawyer. Obviously, that's got a cost attached to it.
So let's touch on. I don't want to ask you personally. I know you work for a service, so you haven't got an individual fee, but. What's the average? What are people looking at these days?
It's so difficult to say.
Okay.
It really. I mean, you're talking.
Is it £30 an hour?
No, you're talking. You're talking thousands as opposed to hundreds. And generally, in the employment tribunal, each party pays their own legal fees. So even if you win, you don't generally get your legal costs back from the other side. That's got the advantage that if you lose, you don't generally have to pay the other side's costs. But yeah,
either way,
yeah.
Pay attention
if
to the
you
bill,
say
you spend
£8,000 legal fees on bringing an unfair dismissal claim, and you win it, great, and you get awarded 10 grand. You really only got 2 grand at the end of the day, and generally it can take anything from 6 months to a year and more to get to a final hearing. So it's not like you bring the claim now and then next month you're at a final hearing and hopefully you're winning and walk away. So it's quite a long process. It is stressful for everyone involved, especially if you've not done it before. And unless you do want to represent yourself, if you've got the cost of legal fees, then that can be a big issue as well. There's never a guarantee of winning either.
And I know you don't speak on behalf of the unions, but would a union... I'm sure that is a question for union. Would they represent you?
Yeah, union could go down as your representative.
I was supposed to still with their employer.
Well, you're no longer employed by them, but
it exists outside of your employment.
Yeah.
But it is a case with your employer.
If it's a case of particular importance, then
dude, we've done this twice already.
Well, yeah.
What would be different?
Well, sometimes if a union thinks that the employer's acted really badly, they would make a decision. Actually, we will back you on this claim because we want to actually get a decision on it because this has affected a lot of our members.
Will support you in the case, because they probably have their own in-house lawyers.
Yeah. So sometimes if it's an ongoing issue with lots of different employees and they almost want to get a decision from a court to say whether it was right or wrong, they might back it then.
Collective bargaining.
Yeah.
What's that?
So that's something completely different. So that's when that's nothing to do with the employment tribunal process. That is basically when an employer and a trade union are negotiating employment terms, like terms and conditions of employment.
Okay.
So they'd enter into a collective bargaining process with the employer and the union.
Do they need to have a number of percentage of people that want to vote for it? Then?
That's for strike action. So that's for something different again.
Demonstrating my lack of awareness on it.
So if a union, I mean, this is always a last resort, like a last resort. But if a union,
I don't know, they seem to threaten it a lot.
Well, they threaten it a lot, but whether they actually do it,
withdrawal of whatever it is, isn't it? Withdrawal of work.
You need a certain percentage number of support from the members of that bargaining group. So those people that are in the union for full strike action, and then there's a ballot and all
not
things
all
like
services. That. I mean, I think I'm going to get it wrong now. Well, fire service I think is one of the last remaining ones that can still withdraw their workforce because the police can't do it, can they?
No,
police can't strike.
No.
I don't think the paramedics can strike either.
I don't know about the police and paramedics, but there's nothing forcing a colleague from striking, even if their union backs it. Can't force you to, and you can't strike without your union.
They can chuck you out the union, though.
Board.
I think union might tell me differently.
Whether they,
I know people were
would.
very strongly suggested to leave.
Yeah,
and were no longer invited to meetings.
Yeah.
Harsh.
So there's lots of disadvantages of tribunal litigation. It can be slow, stressful, costly, risk of losing. But equally, those disadvantages are on your employer who's defending the claim as well. There's often no winners in the tribunal at the end of the day.
Just a bunch of losers.
Well, I mean, you can only really get compensated for losses that you've actually suffered. So if you, for example, get dismissed from your job and bring an unfair dismissal claim, but 2 months later you get a new job, at a similar salary somewhere else, which is great.
So you can't claim
for
I'm going to
losses
be an
you've
employee
not
for the next 10 years.
No.
And you go, well, maybe not, because...
Yeah, exactly. You've already got another job, so good for you for that. But in terms of how it affects the value of your claim, kind of limits it somewhat.
So if you are seeking a claim for I'm never going to work again...
Well, that would
they
be
even award
personal...
Would they have to pay you like year on year?
No,
because you've had another year not employed, we're going to pay you.
That could be if you were, say, injured at work and were unable.
You do
to,
see that,
yeah. You do
where
see
people
that.
say, "Oh, I can never work again."
Well, yeah,
and then that's where the hidden camera stuff
is,
starts coming in, isn't it? And they're like, "We've seen you running your own plasterboard company."
I mean, yeah, you could get ongoing losses. In reality, in the employment tribunal for employment claims, there's certain caps on the amount of compensation you can claim.
Okay.
So unfair dismissal, for example, you can only claim for up to a year's pay.
Oh, really?
Generally, yeah.
After that,
you're expected to be able to have got another
So for the average
job
UK, that's 35, 40 grand.
Yeah.
Not going to last you very bloody long.
No.
You need to get another job within 2 years.
Yeah.
Or most people live to their means. So you need to get a job in the year.
Yeah.
So it's not like, oh, yeah, so-and-so got
It's
a payout. People hear that, they're like, oh, yeah, they got a payout.
Yeah. I mean, discrimination claims you can get more money for. But
Why?
Well, again, there's not a cap on the amount of compensation. That's why
For a discrimination claim?
For a discrimination claim.
Why?
But the reality is there is a cap on it. I mean, if someone's
because I can't quantify how much you're offended or what.
Well, exactly, yeah. I mean, the reality is though that if something's been ongoing for quite a long time, you raise a grievance at work about it, the employer kind of doesn't handle it very well. They're almost encouraging the discriminatory behaviour. Your compensation's going to be higher than if it was one comment that was said to you once in a completely
this is the big thing then. This is why we're so petrified of that sort of stuff, and you've got to stamp it out as soon as you recognise it, because if they then want to retrospectively reference that and go, well, yeah, 3 months ago I was sat in a meeting,
well, yeah,
and so-and-so said,
yeah,
go on, love, go get your arms in the sink or whatever.
Yeah.
And they'd be like, that was it. That was the start. That's when I first didn't ask any of the men around the room to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, you would have to be careful with that. And sometimes employees do go back over things from the past.
Yeah.
If they're, I don't know, discriminated against later, they'll raise something from before.
So, as we close, I just wanted to give people a couple of sort of empowering things perhaps to go away with. So is there any, I mean, people should be familiar with the legislation themselves anyway, and it's probably in their own policies and procedures.
Yeah.
But is there any places, for example, the Discriminatory Act and are there any things what should people be familiar with if they're considering, if they think they've been ill-treated? Who should they be approaching? And what should they be aware of?
Yeah, no, that's fine. In any disciplinary or grievance process, it's the ACAS Code of Practice on disciplinary and grievance procedures. So ACAS is the Advisory, Conciliation and Arbitration Service. It's an organisation that individuals can contact to get any support.
Is it a government organisation?
It may get some government funding, but I don't think it's strictly a government organisation.
Okay.
But they've got this ACAS Code of Practice. If you just Google it, ACAS Code, it will come up with, and it should kind of mirror what your employer's disciplinary policy is in itself.
Okay.
But it kind of sets out the steps that should be gone through in a disciplinary and grievance process. So that's always a good document to have and refer to.
Try and mirror that on your own policy.
Exactly, yeah. And if there's something that your employer's doing that's not in there, then you can call it out at a meeting. With regard to discrimination, that's now all contained in the Equality Act 2010. So before, you used to have like the Disability Discrimination Act, Sex Discrimination Act, Race Relations Act, and all of that was brought into one Act of Parliament, the Equality Act. So that's kind of the go-to act now for anything on discrimination. And there are 9 protected characteristics for discriminations. You've got sex, sexual orientation, disability, race, religion and belief, marriage and civil partnership, pregnancy and maternity, gender reassignment, and did I say age?
Mate, well done. Yeah. I thought you were just going to say the same characteristics. Go and look them up, because I've had to reference them in several interviews, and I'm like, I'm going to forget.
It's a bit like trying to remember all the names of the 7 dwarfs. You get about 6 of them, and then you can't remember the one
I've
that
already said dopey.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm like, I just try and don't be a dick.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? As what I think it should say. Because for so many people, and again, I rely on a theoretical social structure, and you're assuming other people's morals and beliefs are similar to your own, which in this day and age we can never do.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Seb, thanks so much for that, mate.
Thank you so much for having me.
Found that an incredibly empowering, knowledgeable, freaking wide-ranging conversation.
Yeah.
And thank you for your help, brother.
Yeah, thank you very much. Cheers.
The Firefighters Podcast is a global podcast seeking to develop, inspire, and motivate the world of the emergency services operators. Through a series of wide-ranging conversations celebrating those within our sector, we seek to encourage and support this incredible group of people. It's brought to you by myself, operational firefighter Pete Wakefield, and I speak with individuals from all walks of life who I sincerely believe can add value to or develop those who have chosen this life path. Please support your emergency services wherever you are in the world, and thank you for listening.